Everyone, welcome back to FPL Fran. Today's video is going to be my Game Week 25 transfer plans. We're still in between Double Game Week 24. As I mentioned in my previous video, it was not a good position to be in, and it's now an even worse position to be in, although the Carabao Cup results have gone where I assumed, right? We did think that Liverpool and Newcastle would most likely be the eventual finalists. They were the teams that were both probable to get to the finals. I think that was about a 50% chance that they would be the finalists, and then different outcomes leading to other different gaming or double gaming 25 situations could have came up with Arsenal came back, or if Tottenham held out on their aggregate lead. But as it turns out, Liverpool absolutely dominated them. I'm recording this video right now on the Friday. Unfortunately, still been working really hard, so hours are still not the best and haven't had too much time for content, but I hope you guys are all well. I did make a video on chip strategy and my immediate reaction to Double Gaming 25 last week, even though I did miss out on the live stream, but I hope you guys enjoyed that and chose a chip strategy if you had the option to do so. In my case, I felt like I was in an even worse position. I've got to be completely honest. I've not been playing super well recently, but I think part of it too is if you asked me in Game Week 23, was there ever a chance in my mind that there would be a double created via the Liverpool and Aston Villa game for Double Gaming 25, I would have actually immediately said no to you. And unfortunately, as it turns out, of course, that the Premier League created a Double Gaming 25 with Liverpool and Aston Villa, as opposed to the one that I thought could be possible, which would have been just Fulham versus Tottenham. That would have been provisional on Tottenham actually, winning their game within the Carabao Cup. Now, as it turns out, that's not the case. We have now a blank Gaming 29, pretty much close to fully confirmed with Newcastle on Gaming 29. Of course, the FA Cup impacts could spell that out for us, but I think that's basically confirmed. Liverpool and Aston Villa are the only double for Double Gaming 25. Fulham versus Tottenham will just be played as we expected in Gaming 29 as well. Same with Arsenal and Chelsea. So when I look at my team now, clearly that's a position that's going to be quite tough for me in terms of navigating blank Gaming 29. Prospectively, right now I've got 3 Liverpool players, but actually Flecken, so 2. But then I have Rodgers, so 3 from that game in the outfield positions, and then I've got 3 other players in the outfield positions within Newcastle and Palace. So that's kind of the tricky situation that I've created for myself. But at the same time, these are some of the better teams within the league, and some of the better assets to own are playing within them. And that's pretty much it. With Bruno, he was absolutely horrible. So just kind of looking at my team now, Bruno and Rodgers, I still think are very close to future sells. Rodgers does have a double. So yes, of course, it's nice to keep Rodgers, but I'd actually like to sell him as soon as possible. A lot of people will be considering going for Aston Villa players, so that means Konsa or Watkins, and I think I'm unfortunately just not in the position to be able to afford that sort of luxury. I have 1 free transfer for this game week, and my plan to use that free transfer is to actually take another hit as well. I did take a hit in the end, and I did actually bring in Mbumo for Odegaard. Odegaard scored, but he also didn't have a crazy nuclear haul that didn't send me into colossal head loss, because fortunately he had a yellow card and didn't do much in the second half of the game. So as it turns out, Mbumo wasn't a great transfer. And even looking at my team now, I mean, the transfer that I made last week was actually Calvert-Lewin to Ndiaye. I could have actually done something like Calvert-Lewin to Beto. I wasn't thinking about it because I did think that Beto's position could be in doubt, and I just ultimately preferred Ndiaye as the option. Now, as it turns out, Beto has a brace on his hands. He might do something or nothing versus Liverpool, but it's unlikely that Ndiaye will either. It's still nice that I have a goal from Ndiaye, but this position was also Chris Wood's position 2-3 weeks ago. So ultimately, yes, it looks like a terrible transfer in terms of bringing in Alisson in Game Week 24. And I think the thing that hurts the most is that double game week created by the Premier League would have changed my plans a lot if I had held off on that transfer. And I didn't actually think there was a possibility at all that the Aston Villa game could be creating a double in Game Week 25, hence why I never considered the idea of postponing Alisson up until Game Week 24. But as it turns out, it's gone really poorly in the sense that I had an additional transfer to make with DCL to Ndiaye, and I had Becker instead of, let's say, the ability to just go into slot with some of the money that I had in the bank plus a free transfer. But that's how it is in FPL. You make transfers, you make early transfers, sometimes you suffer. Most of the time you do it based on knowing that there's information to come, and I just didn't anticipate that this sort of level of information would come, more so in terms of the fixture scheduling from the Premier League. And fair enough, that's something that I'll definitely have to keep my eye out on future seasons. So you always learn. But in terms of my bench, no regrets, I guess, playing Munoz. I think Hall still had a really good game because We've always characterized teams like Fulham as strong on defense, not so great on attack. They did absolutely deserve that result versus Newcastle, though, so fair play. And it's sad to see another haul for a great defender being put on the bench. I remember I did this last time with Hull versus Man United. It's a tricky one because I think Man United have been playing absolutely diabolical football. I've talked about how Bruno looks awful. Yes, of course, you can mention some of the Europa League performances being good, but for the most part, United have looked absolutely awful in open play. And this applies to almost all the players, really. Not just Bruno, but just Amad Diallo as well. Positionally, of course, when you look at, let's say, average positions, when you watch Bruno throughout the game, he is basically playing a left full-back position, and it's not lovely at all. So it hasn't been enjoyable, and I can't wait to sell him. Rodgers, I still think, has been very dull, despite the great fixtures and the hat-trick in the Champions League. Another yellow card as it stands for this game week. Who knows what he can do for Ipswich, and hopefully he does something, but I'm losing on a little bit of hope here. Otherwise, we have the Trent injury. It seems like he might not be able to make that Plymouth game in the FA Cup, which I think was always expected. Why would you risk it? The question now is going to be whether he actually starts for the Everton game, and I think my inclination is that I'm still going to keep Trent for the next double, but there always is an opportunity for me to maybe move Trent to, I don't know, maybe Konsa if the injury is actually worse than imagined, and then I just simply go Moyes to slot, and then that's how I take a hit. Most people, I think, are in a similar position because they do own Trent and they're already tripled up on Liverpool, whether they have slot or not. And so we all have to be making moves around Trent, and that's that. As far as, let's say, the midfield, Palmer pretty much stays in place. Mbeumo also pretty much stays in place as well. It's always going to be a question between two players in that position, between Bruno and Mbeumo, in terms of transfers to make. But I think the importance to highlight in this sort of meta game right now is that the Bournemouth mids have amazing fixtures coming up, and actually doubling up on them makes a lot of sense because the only future blank is going to be blank Game Week 29. And actually, they're one of the best teams to invest into, regardless of your chip strategy plans for Game Week 29. And that's why I think Bournemouth mids are so exciting. Otherwise, yeah, I have a pretty weak front line, and that's true. But yes, Chris Wood did an absolutely crazy job, and Nottingham Forest have done another number on sort of my team, my rank. But I don't have major regrets because this was the game that I was seeing as a really good game for them. As it turns out, Brighton practically rolled over. They played a double eight of João Pedro and Rutter. They had a sickness within the squad. They subbed off three of their best players at 45 minutes and pretty much waved a white flag. And Chris Wood pretty much destroyed me, as did the rest of the team in terms of Sells, who also made some great saves at the first half of the game. But total aberration in terms of that result, because as we've been saying this season, Nottingham Forest have been extremely solid, very much deserving of their league position, I would say. But then also 7-0 is a complete aberration, even for them, because they've been mostly a very strong defense and then a little bit of a weaker offense this season. But when you have a team like Brighton who can play so poorly at times, I think Brighton are one of the few teams, when you look at, let's say, teams that are maybe overperforming in league table position, I think they're definitely one of those teams. And so, yes, I do own a forward from Brighton, but he is a 5.x forward. I know other forwards have done much better than João Pedro recently, and we'll probably have to continue to evaluate that situation. It's nice, too, to also see that NDI has been playing well, and so is Everton, so maybe he doesn't actually look so poor of an option, not to mention that he's very likely to play in Game Week 29. So my free hit strategies are quite open right now as we look in towards the future. I think the FA Cup games, more crucially, that will happen for the rest of this game week here, will also give us a little bit of an understanding of what teams that we can expect to double around Game Week 33, because the understanding of the fixture template now is we know pretty much what's going to happen in terms of Game Week 25 and 29, but it's more about 33 and 36, your understanding of some of the blanks and where they fall, what teams will blank and double. That is very much informed later on by FA Cup games. So even some of these early FA Cup games will give us an understanding. Then we get another layer of understanding in the future around Game Week 28. So one of the interesting things in terms of fixture strategy to think about is maybe delaying the choice of when to sort of transfer in players and when to kind of set yourself onto a very specific free hit strategy path, to maybe delay that until the Game Week 28 deadline, because between 27 and 28, we will actually have FA Cup fixtures that will be played that will actually inform us of effectively the rest of the curve for this season. So those are kind of my thoughts right now. Team isn't great. Nice to have bench Munoz. Not really. I wish the auto sub for Munoz came this week instead of last week. And I'm done with Odegaard, but I still have another one in Bruno, so we'll have to just manage that situation. The rest of the team looks fine. I'd have to say owning Alisson for the foreseeable actually looks really nice. He is, and Liverpool have been a very, very strong defense this season. I think very impressively so. And it's nice to know, especially that Flecken got injured. So there was some soft benefit, I guess, to moving towards Alisson recently, although I would have just gotten Valdemarsson, I suppose, in a pretty lukewarm game versus Tottenham. So those are kind of my thoughts right now. on the team. I'm not expecting very much from Moyes versus Liverpool. Ultimately, it's one team versus another. I've got 3 Liverpool players regardless. I don't exactly know how I want that game to go. At best, I suppose it's really a 0-0 because I don't have a triple captain. So credit to the managers who went for triple captain 24. I mentioned actually within my chip strategy video that for the people actually considering going for triple captain 24 with a triple captain still, that actually made a lot of sense as a strategy. I can see some managers have already, embarked on that strategy by going for a loose idea of triple captain 24, maybe holding off their AM chip for the future. I myself am most likely to just simply be moving from Moyes to Emery. But if we're talking about table bonus for this game week as well, in terms of game week 25, Fulham versus Nottingham Forest is definitely one of those interesting ones where you can definitely see that, yes, there's table bonus there. There's an opportunity for a home game here for the team seeking table bonus in Fulham, and they're interesting. Whereas with Aston Villa, it's the classic one game where you can hopefully beat down an opponent, which is very similar to Everton versus Leicester. And then you have an opportunity to gamble, I suppose, versus Liverpool. It doesn't look great, I'll be honest, because Liverpool have just looked absolutely imperious as a team, but at least it's Liverpool away if you're thinking about going towards Emery or considering other options. I think other managers aren't so intriguing, but I can see the value of maybe going for a team like Aston Villa anyways, because there is a world where they can get table bonus versus Chelsea. It's very unlikely because that would actually require them to actually lose towards Ipswich first. So why would you want to be investing into a team that does that, especially after a loss towards Wolves? But I think when you look at Game Week 26, the best single game week fixtures right now are looking up to be City once again. Once again, the common theme here, betting against Liverpool, which doesn't scream great because they are very, very clearly the best team in the league by far. Other than that, I think Arsenal, we mentioned, is a classic beatdown game. Leicester have a chance at table bonus because, of course, it's Brentford. It's not like one of the toughest opponents within the league, but Brentford have done really well in terms of actually matching up versus the bottom half and getting all the results that they need from those teams. So that's something to mention. Other than that, I don't think there's anything too intriguing in terms of table bonus right now. At one point, I think we could have maybe been considering, let's say, Palace as well, but Fulham just looked like a very strong team. So actually moving towards Marco Silva or let's say Emery, I think you understand that maybe on 26 you could still use a free transfer, but it really depends on the position that you're at with your team. I don't have the luxury of being able to continuously spend too many free transfers on managers, and so I'm in a position where in Game Week 26, I'm probably likely to stick with the manager that I go for in Game Week 25, and that's kind of my immediate thoughts in terms of the assistant manager chip. So that's my team right now. What are my transfer plans for Game Week 25? What I would say is, yes, I do need to force a transfer on a manager, so I'm probably most likely going to go towards Emery. That also means that I have another free transfer to make. Aston Villa are doubling, so the only midfielder of choice that I'm actually considering is going to be Rashford. But do I really want Rashford? Probably not. Do I think Rashford's going to get the insane amount of minutes that I'd really want from the double, or is he going to play all the minutes versus Ipswich, particularly since he probably hasn't been training or has been very fit recently? No, because I think I look at, let's say, Malin, who just signed for Aston Villa. Did he play the first game for Aston Villa? No, he didn't. So I'm not really looking at Rashford as the transfer. I think that doesn't make too much sense. It's a bit too much of a gamble for me, and he's going to be a future transfer out if I don't go for free at 29. So I really like the idea of simply just going towards Dango here. I'm actually taking a hit for Dango, so another hit for another midfielder, but this time I sell Bruno. This would actually give me a lot of money in the bank, and I think the loose transfer plan that I'll talk about in a moment will be be around maybe a free hit 29 potential strategy as it stands. But I think the idea of going for at least free up a lot of the cash with going for Dango here is that actually that still leaves me in a position where my team is very flexible with what chip strategy I want to go for. And it also does unfortunately take out someone like Bruno, who does have some good fixtures. So for example, Bruno has great fixtures on 29 and 27, but you can also just look at Man United now and just simply say that they've been absolutely awful. So actually selling them and then actually looking at some of those green fixtures, sure, they're great, but do I really care? I don't think so when there's so much value towards the Bournemouth midfielders, including Dango and Kluivert and even Semenyo. So I just really think that that's how good Bournemouth are and how good their fixtures are as well. So just having a brief look at this, only I would say, honestly, even Brighton and Spurs away, that those being the away fixtures don't even mean much to me. They simply just have a very, very clean run of fixtures up until game week 35, where they face Arsenal. So there's not much to be said. Bournemouth are one of the better teams in the league. We actually mentioned that within our What We've Learned series in Game Week 21. I'm going to do an update on this for this week, so stay tuned for that. But yeah, Dango seems like a great transfer. They didn't really sign another attacker that really concerns me for the rest of this season, to be quite honest. And so Dango seems like a very, very good move to make and will most likely join my team for Game Week 25. So I'm actually here with the Fantasy Football Hub, my team pick and rating tool. I clearly have my assistant manager being played, but that's not within the interface here. I'll talk through my assistant manager transfers, of course, and I've already factored that into my plans. But one of the crucial topics as we jump into a week like this is for a lot of people who plan to maybe, let's say, save their free hit and not use it on Game Week 29, this could already be the game week where you already start to consider some of your Newcastle players. It is City, and that actually looks like a pretty good game as things stand, but it's about just avoiding a general poor run of fixtures and maybe being able to jump ahead in terms of other ones, in terms of other teams, or just simply going for the alternative strategy, which is to kind of make transfers around ignoring these kind of Liverpool and Newcastle players and maybe actually just investing into other players that you want to get into, like the Bournemouth midfielder. So I think there's two approaches to this. My general approach right now is, I think, because I'm so heavily invested into free at 29 and Game Week 29 is pretty close, I don't really have enough free transfers to probably maximize the value around that. Now, FA Cup games could change my plan, so I'm kind of going to lay out what my general strategy would be if I do pursue free at 29 right now, which I think is going to be on the top of my list. The transfer that I would make is to go out of Bruno into Dango. And the reason why I go into Dango is because that gives me a lot of money in the bank. I make this transfer, Dango starts for me this game week. It's quite a non-controversial game week because I've got really good fixtures across the board. On 26, I think the transfer that I'll make is simply to bin Rodgers after that great double, and then actually to move into either Semenyo or Kluivert. Now, because I have money in the bank, I think I'll still go Kluivert. I generally do prefer Kluivert over Semenyo because his minutes have been really good. And they've been really good because they just don't have depth in the team right now. The only depth that they have is Marcus Tavernier, who's actually substituting Brooks for most of the time on that right wing position. So I think that most, like right now, what we're seeing, Kluivert and Dango's minutes look really, really good and safe. And so the only situation where Semenyo was better, like early in the season, was when you saw more rotation for players like Kluivert and Dango wasn't playing the center forward position, despite being such a dangerous player. And we talked about Dango specifically, if you guys remember, within the What We've Learned series, by mentioning that he's an actually extremely productive player, and that was when he was playing left wing. Now he's playing center forward, and that just makes him that more intriguing to me. So that's kind of it in terms of my transfers. Now, if I step back a week, right, I will have much less money in the bank because on Game Week 25, I will be transferring my assistant managers. So this money in the bank is not necessarily true. The money needs to go towards someone like Moyes. And so on Game Week 26, instead, I'll have a little bit less money in the bank. I'll probably be keeping Emery within my team. And then I move towards Game Week 27, where I actually have a general plan to move with the assistant manager cash back in my bank to go towards Jackson. And the reason why I'm planning this is because it's just simply Southampton at home and Leicester at home. The wild card is not too far away. By owning these Bournemouth midfielders as well, I don't really need that much money in the game. I've got most of the players that I really want to have, and then I can optimize around the fixtures as well, which is the plan. I can obviously rotate between Dango and Kluivert. We'll see what happens around that time. But yeah, that can actually give me a very strong team for around Game Week 28. And then I can just go in towards Game Week 29 with one free transfer at least. And then I can kind of manage up until a little bit of a later wild card. Now, a lot of people will look into this team and probably say that, yeah, maybe free at 29 isn't the best strategy. And I think that's also something that we can definitely say. Hard to say whether it is good or bad now, because I think it still depends very much on those FA Cup results and whether we get any upsets. But the alternative strategy that I'll actually pursue if I am loosely planning to not use a free hit on 29, which means that I'll be free hitting on 34 instead and planning for an early wild card and an early bench boost. The reason why a lot of people are thinking about that strategy is because Double Game Week 33 is expected to be the biggest fixture. I talked about that in terms of my chip strategy video most recently, and the reason and because I'm already using my assistant manager chip, because I've already used my triple captain chip, I should be incentivized to actually bench boosting on 33 to kind of optimize around that. And so if I wildcard on 31, I probably should also be dead ending on 29. Now, the unfortunate thing is that probably means I'll be selling maybe at least 2 to 3 of my Newcastle and Liverpool players, and obviously Morgan Rodgers as well. So my general idea is on Game Week 25, if I do pursue such a strategy, then I would already lock in now. This would probably only happen if I actually see major cup upsets that would change my mind in terms of how I approach free hit 34. But I could be considering something like Isak to Havertz. But I think the more passive, safe option is just to kind of bin off the money from Hall and to go into Konsa. And that would still give me enough money in the bank to move from Moyes to Emery. So that's 0.3, which is exactly what I need. And I'm probably going to keep Emery as my manager for 26. So that's a plan that I've kind of formulated within my head, where I just go for Konsa instead, play a 4-5-1, and ultimately enjoy, I suppose, this game week like that. And then on 26, I can make that transfer for Rogers into someone like Dango again. And then I can kind of work towards effectively moving my team towards game week 29, where we have that blank game week. So as things stand in terms of 27, this is probably a game week where actually, instead of making a transfer on 27, like the previous transfer path where I went for Jackson, I just wait. I sit on information. I enjoy Bruno versus Ipswich at home. And then I move towards game week 28 instead, where I make that decision in terms of, based on the FA Cup results, what chip strategy I go for. So that's basically the alternative path. This path isn't so bad in the sense that I think if I was to think about if I was not going to make any chip strategy at all I'm selling off here at this moment in time is Hall. I get to keep Mo or for game week 28. And then on game week 29, I can make some big moves with some certain players, try to dead end the team, and then who knows? If I try to keep and recoup as much money as possible between Salah and Isak, maybe that can just leave me with a very strong wild card still for game week 31. But that's kind of the rough plan. If I look at Liverpool's fixtures as well, ultimately they don't really have any poor fixtures. The poor fixtures would be arguably 26, which isn't even a poor fixture at this moment in time with City the way that they are. Yes, of course, they've got new signings, but I don't think much has really changed substantially with how City have played. For the most part, they've been a pretty poor team. So I think one of the regrets, of course, of maybe bidding off some Liverpool players here in this juncture in game week 29 is, the idea that, okay, I'll miss out on some Liverpool players potentially for 30 or 31, but it could also give me a big differential versus the rest of the field, maybe for a positive for once, not owning Liverpool players. And we'll have to just see how that goes. But that is something as well that's on my mind. All it would require is, as I said, selling Hall. Let me know what your thoughts are in terms of both the transfer plans. I think committing now is probably not the best idea, but it does feel really appetizing to simply just move towards Dango and then actually commit towards the strategy. It's something that has benefited me in the past in terms of FPL, in terms of simplifying my planning. So I do like locking in an idea, and I don't really care if it goes poorly because I'm sort of just gambling that other people won't be on the same path as myself. But sometimes staying flexible can be proven to be very, very good. Last season, when I committed to an early wildcard strategy and gave me my wildcard 2, it really, really fell flat on my face because I had a lot of injuries that were unique to myself, and suddenly the path that I was on that was unique was uniquely bad. And that can happen. So I think this alternative transfer path is also something that could work out really well for me if I go towards game week 29 by trying to reduce the amount of Newcastle Liverpool players that I have, and then making some moves that would actually reduce my bank in terms of the transfer value that I have for the season for the next wildcard. But it could actually mean that I can handle, I think, and navigate the landscape of, let's say, blank game week 34 a little bit better, because depending on, let's say, some of the early FA Cup results that will happen later this week, we might understand how big that blank could be and how important a free hit could be in terms of circumnavigating that sort of blank. So those are my thoughts right now. Hope you guys have a wonderful week ahead. I'll see you guys soon. Take care and goodbye.